What if the silence isn't just yours? What if the person you walked away from, or who walked away from you, is using the exact same strategy? No contact? This is where the psychological tension reaches its peak. Two people locked in a quiet war, both waiting, both watching, neither flinching first. And here's the uncomfortable truth. When both parties are doing no contact, it's no longer about just healing or setting boundaries. It becomes a test of emotional endurance, inner discipline, and psychological warfare. But let's be very clear. No contact done with the intention to manipulate or provoke isn't really no contact. It's performance. It's waiting with one eye on the door, checking your phone, wondering if they'll cave first. And when both people are doing that, the game becomes toxic fast. So how do you know if they're doing no contact too? And more importantly, how do you win that game without breaking your peace or lowering your value? This video isn't just about waiting longer, it's about understanding the deeper psychology behind mutual silence. Whether they're doing no contact to punish you, test your feelings, or protect themselves, we are going to break down how to stay powerful, clear-minded, and in control. We'll dive into the signs they're doing it too, the emotional leverage you still have, how to hold your frame even when it hurts, and what happens when silence gets weaponized on both sides. If you've ever been caught in a standoff wondering who'll blink first, this is the video you need. Let's start decoding. When both people go silent after a breakup or emotional fallout, it creates one of the most psychologically intense dynamics imaginable. It's not just space, it's strategy. And when both sides are executing no contact, the silence becomes a mirror. You're not just sitting with your own emotions anymore. You're wondering what they're thinking, what they're feeling, and whether their silence is a move or a message. Mutual no contact creates a power vacuum, and both sides are waiting to see who will fill it. But here's the reality. Most people don't do no contact for the same reasons. One person may be using it as a tool to heal, to reclaim self-worth, to reset boundaries. The other may be using it to manipulate, punish, or bait you into chasing. And if you don't know which one you're dealing with, you can get emotionally disoriented, caught between the need for dignity and the fear of being forgotten. That's why understanding the motive behind their silence is key. Are they using no contact because they genuinely need to process? Or are they doing it to provoke insecurity, hoping you'll cave so they can regain emotional control? The signs are subtle, but they're there. Look at the last interaction before the silence. Was it respectful or emotionally volatile? Did they try to create guilt, plant doubt, or say something that stung just before pulling away? These are signs of tactical silence, not emotional healing. Now, the danger of mutual no contact lies in the fact that when both people are trying to win, no one actually wins. The emotional tension builds, but neither party gets closure. This is why your intention behind no contact must be pure and rooted in self-respect, not reaction. If you're doing it to heal, grow, or reclaim your peace, you've already won, no matter what they do. But if your no contact is performative, if you're silently checking their stories, waiting for a message, secretly hoping your absence triggers regret, you've just made yourself a prisoner of their response. True no contact, even when they're doing it too, is about learning to sit in uncertainty without losing self-control. It's about becoming so secure in your own energy that their silence doesn't unbalance you, it empowers you. Because at the end of the day, whoever breaks no contact first reveals more emotional investment. But whoever breaks it from a place of insecurity also hands over their power. So the real question isn't, are they doing no contact too? It's, can you maintain your power when they do? And if you can, the silence becomes your greatest statement. When both people go silent, the psychological game that begins isn't always conscious, but it's real and it's intense. In the absence of words, the brain fills in the gaps with assumptions, fears, and projections. And for two emotionally connected people, mutual no contact becomes less about time apart and more about who will reach emotional threshold first. Here's the key truth. Whoever breaks no contact first exposes their emotional leverage. That doesn't always mean weakness, but it does reveal vulnerability, timing, and attachment. People often believe the one who reaches out is the one who loses, but that's only true if they reach out from neediness. If you break no contact to reassert boundaries, deliver closure, or simply express clarity without seeking validation, you're still in control. But if your message is driven by anxiety, craving, or fear of being forgotten, you've already handed over the power. The person who breaks silence first, especially in relationships marked by manipulation or emotional imbalance, often ends up having to explain themselves, apologize, or chase. That's why in mutual no contact, patience is power. Each day that passes without contact increases emotional pressure, but not equally. The more emotionally avoidant someone is, the longer they can suppress. But even the most emotionally distant person has a limit. They just hide it better. They stay distracted, go out, post stories, pretend they're unaffected. But inside, they're watching, waiting, testing if your silence is real or if it's just a ploy to get a reaction. And here's the brutal twist. Some people intentionally do no contact to punish you, hoping their silence will make you suffer. Others do it because they're genuinely hurting and need time to regroup. But regardless of their reason, the longer you hold your line, the more your absence speaks. It creates contrast. They remember how available you were before. They start to question if you've moved on, if you're done, if they even mattered. And that fear, that sudden absence of validation can spark deep internal conflict, because now the attention they used to control is gone. And what do humans crave more than attention? Reassurance. In the absence of your presence, they lose both. That's when cracks start to form in their ego. They replay memories, stalk your socials in silence, ask mutual friends about you, and even consider reaching out, just to see if you'll still respond the way you used to. So understand this. When you don't break first, you teach them something they didn't expect. You teach them that you're not waiting, that your peace isn't held hostage by their behavior. And that lesson, that's the beginning of their regret. Because the one who waits without chasing, observes without reacting, and heals without needing closure, always wins in the end. Your silence is not just the lack of words, it's a mirror. And for someone used to controlling the dynamic, your absence becomes an unexpected spotlight on their own behavior. The first thing it triggers is confusion. If they were used to you checking in, chasing, or reacting emotionally, your silence feels like a broken pattern. It creates what psychologists call cognitive dissonance, a gap between what they expect and what they're experiencing. That gap forces them to reconcile with a new version of you, the version that doesn't need them. That's when the internal spiral begins. They may try to distract themselves, scrolling, partying, dating, anything to drown out the voice in their head that's now growing louder. And that voice keeps whispering, "Why haven't they reached out? Did I go too far? Are they done for real?" At first, they'll rationalize it. They're just playing a game. They'll crack. But the longer the silence holds, the more the rationalizations break down. The ego, which was once inflated by the belief that you were always available, starts to collapse under its own weight. And when that ego cracks, vulnerability rushes in. That's when they start checking your social media more often. That's when they replay conversations, scan old photos, and read past texts trying to decode what changed. They start to remember the comfort you gave, the attention you showed, the validation they once dismissed. And now that it's gone, they feel the void. Your silence becomes louder than any message you could have sent. It becomes proof that you have the ability to let go. That's what rattles them most. Not that you're angry, not that you're hurt, but that you might actually be at peace, that you're capable of detachment. That's what they never expected. Because people who manipulate, ghost, or play emotional games often assume the other person needs closure, needs answers, needs resolution. But when you give them none of that and still don't react, they're left alone with the consequences of their own behavior. And here's what happens next. They begin to romanticize the past. The version of you that gave, that listened, that stayed through their chaos now becomes a symbol of peace they can no longer access. Even if they were the one who pulled away, they start to wonder what it would be like to go back, to fix things, to test the waters. But your silence has changed the game. The emotional leverage has shifted. Now, if they return, they do so knowing they lost power. That's why they'll test the waters subtly, liking a post, replying to a story, sending a meme. They want to know if you're still available. But when you stay calm, unbothered, and slow to respond, if you even respond at all, they realize they're no longer the one in control. And whether they admit it or not, they feel that shift deep in their nervous system. Because silence, when used with emotional control, doesn't just protect your peace, it repositions you as the one they underestimated. And that quiet repositioning, that's what makes them miss you, regret losing you, and realize that access to you was a privilege, not a guarantee. When someone distances themselves and expects you to chase, they do so from a place of perceived control. They assume that your silence is temporary, that you're stealing in your emotions, waiting to react. But as time stretches and you remain composed, something deeper starts to shift. The strength they projected, the emotional distance, the seeming indifference, was never real power. It was a mask, and masks only work when the audience plays along. The moment you stop performing in their script, their illusion begins to fall apart. They were never as detached as they made you believe. In fact, that detachment was their survival mechanism, used to protect themselves from emotional responsibility. When you walk away without a scene, without begging, without lashing out, you strip them of the role they're used to playing. Suddenly, they're no longer the one doing the rejecting. They become the one who was left, even if technically they ghosted you. Why? Because you didn't follow the script. You didn't give them the reaction they needed to feel powerful, and that throws everything off balance. They begin to question their control. That's when the subtle cracks in their armor show. Maybe they post more often, hoping you'll watch. Maybe they bring up your name to mutual friends, pretending it's casual. Maybe they even act colder or louder online, as if to scream, "I don't care." But the truth is, if they truly didn't care, they wouldn't need to broadcast it. Their overcompensation is a reaction to the silence you've held. And deep down, that silence feels like a judgment, a verdict they can't appeal. Because it wasn't dramatic, it was dignified. And dignity is what kills their illusion of superiority. They expected anger, tears, maybe a begging text, but they got nothing. And nothing is powerful. It means they no longer live rent-free in your mind. It means their ghosting or emotional withdrawal didn't work. It means you reclaimed your self-worth without needing a conversation, a closure, or a confrontation. That's what makes it burn. And now, every memory they suppressed starts to surface. Every kind gesture you gave, every time you showed up, every moment they dismissed you while secretly craving your presence, it all starts to echo in their mind. Not as regret, not yet. First it's discomfort, then it's irritation, then it becomes obsession. They want to know what you're thinking. They want to believe they still matter to you. But you've flipped the script. You've made your silence louder than their exit. And now their mind becomes the battlefield. They'll replay your reactions in the past and compare them to your current detachment. They'll wonder, are they done for real? Have they moved on? Was I ever that important to them? That uncertainty, born from your silence, is what starts to eat away at their false confidence. And the more time passes without a reaction from you, the more that false strength crumbles. Because the truth is, emotional power doesn't come from who leaves first. It comes from who lets go first. And when they realize you let go without needing to prove it, you become the one they can't stop thinking about. Not because you tried to win them back, but because you didn't. And now, their mind becomes the battlefield. They'll replay your reactions in the past and compare them to your current detachment. They'll wonder, are they done for real? Have they moved on? Was I ever that important to them? That uncertainty, born from your silence, is what starts to eat away at their false confidence. And the more time passes without a reaction from you, the more that false strength crumbles. Because the truth is, emotional power doesn't come from who leaves first. It comes from who lets go first. And when they realize you let go without needing to prove it, you become the one they can't stop thinking about. Not because you tried to win them back, but because you didn't. There's a moment that hits hard, and it doesn't come when you argue, cry, or beg. It comes when you vanish, not physically, but emotionally. When they no longer have access to your validation, your attention, your energy. That's when they're left alone with the very person they've been running from all along, themselves. And that confrontation is brutal. Most people don't ghost or pull away because they found someone better. They do it to escape the mirror you hold up to them, the mirror that reflects their emotional immaturity, their fear of intimacy, their need to control without commitment. But when you go silent, that mirror doesn't disappear. It just turns inward. And now, without you in the picture, they can't deflect blame, shift guilt, or use your reactions to avoid responsibility. They're left facing the emptiness they tried to fill with ego, games, and control. You become a haunting presence in their absence, not because you said anything, but because you didn't. And that silence echoes. It doesn't scream, it whispers. It whispers questions they don't want to answer. Why did I push them away? Why did I act like I didn't care when I did? Why do I feel regret when they're the one I let go? These questions don't hit all at once. They hit slowly, like a delayed emotional debt finally collecting interest. They go about their life trying to numb it. Distractions, attention from others, fake confidence, even anger. But none of it works. Because silence isn't just an absence of words. It's a message that says, you didn't break me, you just freed me. And that's a hard truth to accept for someone who thought they had power over your emotions. See, they were prepared for a reaction. They were ready for closure, for drama, even for hate. What they weren't ready for was indifference. And indifference is the one thing they can't control. It tells them that they no longer have influence over how you feel, that they no longer get to dictate the emotional terms. And for someone who operates through emotional push-pull dynamics, that realization is terrifying. They start remembering not just the good moments, but the way you made them feel seen, understood, maybe even loved, something they rarely admit they need. And now that it's gone, they can't unfeel it. They can't replace it. Because what they lost wasn't just your presence. It was the safety of knowing you were still emotionally available. Your silence rewrites the narrative. No longer are you the one abandoned, they are the one exposed. Exposed to someone who couldn't handle the depth you offered. Someone who ran from growth, from intimacy, from truth. And now, every time they try to move on, they're followed by a shadow. Not of who you were, but who they failed to become. That's the real consequence of your silence. It's not punishment, it's reflection. And for many, that reflection hurts far more than anything you could have said. Because silence makes them confront the very parts of themselves they worked so hard to avoid. And in doing so, it breaks them in a way words never could. When they go silent, pull back, or initiate no contact themselves, they're not always doing it to move on. Often, they're testing who breaks first. It becomes a psychological chess match, a battle of egos disguised as detachment. And here's what most people don't realize. In these moments, silence becomes strategy. The one who breaks first, texts first, explains themselves, seeks closure, loses leverage. Why? Because the other person now knows they still hold power. Their absence created an emotional imbalance, and your response confirms that they're still in control of how you feel. That's why maintaining your silence isn't just about self-respect, it's about reclaiming your power. But this isn't easy. You'll battle urges. Your mind will invent reasons to justify reaching out. What if they're hurting too? Maybe they just need a sign I still care. What if they moved on and forgot me? These thoughts aren't truth. They're emotional withdrawal symptoms. You're not craving them, you're craving the emotional certainty they used to provide. And once you realize that, you stop playing their game on their terms. You start playing it on yours. Here's the psychological truth. People who use silence as a weapon don't expect to be out-silenced. They expect you to crack, to chase, to prove your worth. They want to feel superior in the emotional hierarchy. When you don't respond, you shift the frame entirely. Now, they're the ones who have to question their worth. Did I lose someone I underestimated? Did I make a mistake? Why haven't they tried to fix it? These thoughts slowly chip away at the illusion of control they built. Their ego starts to erode under the weight of your indifference because silence removes the emotional supply they were feeding on. Narcissistic types especially can't handle this. They rely on reaction to feel real, to feel significant. When you give them none, they begin to spiral, not outwardly at first, but internally. And it always starts the same way, with doubt. Doubt becomes curiosity. Curiosity becomes anxiety. Anxiety becomes longing, and longing becomes regret. That's the chain reaction your silence initiates, but only if you hold the line. The moment you crack, that whole emotional collapse resets. That's why the game isn't about waiting for them. It's about outlasting their ego. You're not just holding back to protect your heart. You're doing it because you've realized that reacting means losing position. The longer you remain calm, grounded, and unaffected, the more you distort their perception. They start projecting meaning onto your silence. Are they over me? Were they faking their feelings the whole time? Are they talking to someone else? Their mind becomes your greatest ally. They begin to torment themselves with possibilities, and none of them give them the certainty they crave. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to post, hint, or send signals. The mystery is the message, and the message is, I've moved beyond the place where you controlled me. This chess game isn't about one checkmate moment. It's about making every move count. It's about controlling yourself so thoroughly that you disarm their entire strategy. And when they finally return, because most do, they won't return from a place of dominance. They'll return from confusion, curiosity, and emotional imbalance. That's when the power has shifted completely. But remember, the victory only holds if you earned it. Not by pretending, not by faking detachment, but by becoming someone who doesn't need their validation. The one who wins this game isn't the most manipulative. It's the one who no longer plays to be chosen, only to choose. When someone mirrors no contact, especially after mistreating or undervaluing you, they often wear the mask of indifference. But don't mistake silence for peace. Underneath the surface, there's an internal storm most won't ever confess. At first, they feel empowered. They didn't reach out either. Good, I'm in control. But that power is shallow. It's based on a fantasy that they can remain emotionally unaffected. The reality is, emotional bonds don't break clean just because silence starts. And if they've ever had feelings for you, your disappearance leaves a vacuum they can't quite explain. It starts with occasional thoughts, passive curiosity, I wonder if they miss me. Then comes the social media checks, then the dreams, then the emotional flashbacks. And eventually, the heavy questions creep in. Did I mess this up? Were they the one who actually cared? The silence you hold begins pressing on their self-worth. And if they're the kind who mistreated you, your absence exposes a painful truth. They weren't as replaceable in your life as they assumed, but you might be in theirs. This is when pride turns into pressure, and pressure becomes paranoia. You see, most people don't fear you moving on. They fear you healing, because healing means they no longer get to hurt you. Healing means their presence, their validation, their manipulation, it all becomes irrelevant. And when you go silent without bitterness, without dramatics, without chasing or begging, you disrupt their entire framework. They're left wondering, how can someone I wounded show me grace and then vanish? That contradiction unsettles them. They expect retaliation or weakness or proof that they still matter. But when you give none of that, you force them to sit in the mess they created, alone. And that stillness begins to haunt them. Even if they pretend to be unbothered, their body betrays them. Sleepless nights, mood swings, hyper-awareness of anything related to you. They hear your name in songs. They misinterpret strangers for your silhouette. They feel your absence in quiet moments when they least expect it, right before sleep, mid-conversation, or alone in traffic. Because even if they ghosted you, they never expected you to become the ghost, and that haunts them far more than any confrontation ever could. But they'll rarely admit it. Their ego won't let them. They'll keep posting like they're thriving. They'll pretend your silence was expected. They might even date someone new to prove how unbothered they are. But behind the scenes, they're collecting every breadcrumb of you they can find, replaying the last words, wondering why it feels like you disappeared first, even if they technically walked away. And deep down, they start to feel it. Regret. Not just for how they treated you, but for misjudging your strength. They assumed silence meant weakness. They never expected it to become the loudest thing you've ever said. And that's the paradox. They want your silence to mean you care, while needing it to mean you don't. Because if you don't care, they were never as important as they believed. But if you do, and you're still silent, then they lost something they can't get back. Either way, they lose. That's what they secretly feel. That's what they won't say. But it's exactly why silence works when words won't. When you enter no contact and the other person mirrors it, days turning into weeks, it's easy to slip into doubt. You begin wondering, are they stronger than me? Are they actually over it? Did they never care at all? But the truth is this: silence is not a scoreboard. It's a psychological mirror. When both parties go quiet, what gets revealed isn't who's more stubborn, it's who can sit with themselves longer without relief, who can face the emotional weight of disconnection without folding just to soothe their ego. And if you were genuine, loyal, and emotionally invested, your silence isn't about pretending you're unaffected. It's about choosing dignity over desperation. It's about sending a message not with noise, but with absence. If you don't value me, I remove myself, fully. If they're mirroring your silence out of ego, they're not in control, they're in delay. Emotional suppression works like a time bomb. The longer someone avoids their feelings, the more intense the explosion when those emotions finally catch up. But here's the key: you can't wait for it. You can't obsessively monitor their story views, their activity, or their timeline. You must detach from the outcome. Because true no contact isn't a game to win. It's a reset to reclaim your peace. You're not punishing them. You're reintroducing yourself to you. They might never reach out. That's a possibility you must confront head-on. And if that's the case, let it confirm something powerful. They were never capable of holding the version of you that evolved from the pain they caused. They may stay silent, but that silence isn't strength. It's fear. Fear of accountability, fear of rejection, fear of your growth. And that's where your real power lies. Not in whether they speak again, but in how much stronger, wiser, and more centered you become without needing them to. Understand this: when someone goes silent after ghosting or mistreating you, and then stays silent as you hold your boundary, it's not because you were forgettable. It's because you were unforgettable, and they don't know how to come back without losing face. They can't return without confronting the guilt, the shame, or the reality that they lost someone solid. That's a confrontation many avoid because their ego isn't built for accountability. It's built for avoidance. So what do? You keep living. You stop checking. You stop waiting. You wake up and treat each day like a page in a new chapter, not an echo from the last one. You use their silence as confirmation, not confusion. Because if they wanted to speak, they would. If they wanted to fix it, they'd try. No matter what trauma or attachment style they have, effort is a choice. And the longer they remain silent, the clearer the answer becomes, not just about who they are, but about how deeply you're healing. In the end, when both sides go quiet, the one who moves forward, not just pretends to but actually evolves, is the one who wins. Not in the petty sense, but in the sacred one. Because you didn't just let go of them, You let go of needing anything from them. And once you reach that level of emotional self-sufficiency, their silence stops being scary. It starts becoming irrelevant. You're no longer waiting for closure. You are the closure. So now you know, when someone goes silent, it doesn't always mean indifference. Sometimes it's fear, pride, strategy, or a desperate attempt to reclaim power. But here's what separates the emotionally strong from the emotionally weak. The strong don't flinch. They don't break no contact to soothe their own discomfort. They don't need to win the silence. They become the silence. If they're doing no contact too, good, let them. Because when you're the one who understands the game, the one who's done the inner work, the one who can sit in the void without reaching, you already win. The person who caves first loses their leverage, but the one who stays grounded, focused, and unfazed becomes unforgettable. While they're wondering if you care, you're building a life so powerful they have to notice your absence. So here's your reminder. Do not break. Do not beg. Do not reach. Let their silence become a monument to what they lost when they lost you. And if they never reach out, then they were never strong enough to stand next to you to begin with. You're not waiting. You're evolving. And when you rise in silence, the world starts to listen. If this hit deep, comment below how long it's been and what you've learned from staying silent. I read every comment. And if you're ready to master emotional control, reverse the power dynamic, and never be the one chasing again, subscribe right now. This channel is for those who outgrow the games and become the storm. Stay sharp, stay calm, stay untouchable.